Hallo Deutschlerner! Today's video is going to be a bit of a deviation from the usual things that I upload on this channel. Today I'm going to be answering some questions that I've had in the comments sections of videos in the past, but I just haven't gotten around to answering. These questions are generally good questions that merit an answer, but answering in a comment would be too long and answering in a full video would be too short. So today I'm going to answer these quick questions that viewers have had about a variety of different topics in German. You can skip ahead to any of the questions via the timestamps down below, or follow the progress bar at the bottom of this video to skip to what you want to know about the most. First up, we have the difference between nun and jetzt. Both mean now, and mostly they're interchangeable. You can always replace jetzt with nun, but the other way around doesn't always work. Jetzt kaufen wir neue Schuhe. Now we are buying new shoes. Nun kaufen wir neue Schuhe. Now we are buying new shoes. These two basically mean the same thing. Jetzt is definitely more common in spoken language. Jetzt translates as right now, while nun is more general and is better translated as presently. Nun is more abstract. This allows it to be attached to a circumstance, as in, you get a flat tire on the Autobahn and you have to pull over. Your friend leans over to you and says, "Was machen wir nun?" Nun would be in this current situation. It does mean right now, but you're technically not talking about the time, but rather the situation that you find yourself in. You could use jetzt here, but that would be referring exactly to the time and not necessarily to the situation. Fun fact, you can actually use both of these words together and say nun jetzt to mean both in that situation and at that time. Wenn du nun jetzt über die Wörter nun und jetzt nachdenkst, kannst du dich entscheiden, welches Wort zu benutzen ist. Now if you think about the words nun and jetzt, you can choose which word to use. Due to the abstractness of nun, you can also use it more generally, which is why it's often used as an interjection or filler word. Nun can also be translated with well as an interjection. Nun, wir können ins Kino gehen. Well, we could go to the movies. If you're familiar with the word also, you can also use that instead of nun for the same effect. Also, wir können ins Kino gehen. Well, we can go to the movies. You can also combine nun with mal to make it nun mal. This usage is translated as just, as in, ich trinke nun mal kein Alkohol. I just don't drink any alcohol. There's a pinch of I don't drink any alcohol, so leave me alone in that phrase, however, so be careful with its use. When you use nun mal like this in a sentence, it's actually being used as a modal particle, which is a completely different type of word from the other examples. Let me know in the comments down below if you want me to do an entire video explaining what modal particles are and how they're used. Jetzt verstehst du die Unterschiede zwischen jetzt und nun. Nun geh und lerne Deutsch. Now you understand the differences between jetzt and nun. Now go and learn German. What about the difference between von and vor when it's used as of in English? Many students struggle with the difference between von and vor, and the differences can be pretty subtle at times, so let me try and explain. Vor is kind of like in front of or before. This can be literally, like in vor dem Geschäft, in front of the store. It can also be more figuratively, like vor 3 Wochen, 3 weeks ago. Von generally translates as from in English and answers the question woher, as in from where. This can be a location or an origin, like in the words von der Schule, from the school, or less literal in von meiner Suppe, of my soup or from my soup. The problem with these two prepositions comes up when they aren't used in such literal uses. So when you're afraid of something, for example, you use the phrase Angst vor etwas haben. Why do you use vor in this instance? I would argue that is a figurative in front of. I'm afraid of spiders in that I am afraid when I am in front of spiders. Ich habe Angst vor Spinnen. When do you use ein, eine, or einen, and der, den, die, and das? I could spend all day explaining this idea, but let's try to break it down into the simplest parts. The so-called ein words are words like ein, eine, einen, and so on. These all translate as a or an in English. If you mean to talk about something as a noun, but you don't need to specify exactly which one of those nouns, you can use an ein word. Der words are like der, die, das, and den. These all translate as the in English. They specify exactly which of the objects you're talking about. Now for some examples. Der Hund steht vor dem Haus. The dog is standing in front of the house. In this sentence, we know which dog it is and which house it is. The words der and dem tell us that it isn't just any dog or any house, but it's that dog and that house. Ein Hund steht vor einem Haus. A dog stands in front of a house. This sentence doesn't specify which dog or which house. This could be a general statement about the world. Somewhere in the world there is a dog standing in front of a house, but I don't know which dog or which house. I didn't specify because I used an ein word. As for the ein versus einen versus einem, or der versus den versus dem part of things, I will have to refer you to my series of videos that I have about the German case system. There are 4 cases: nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. Each of them have their own specific uses and list of articles, ein words or der words. I have links in the description to a playlist for all of the cases. There is way too much to unpack there for just this video. If es means it, why is it not appropriate to always use es when we translate the word it in English? In English we use the pronoun it to refer to anything that does not have an intrinsic gender. There is no such thing as a grammatical gender in English. This becomes a problem in German because there are 3 grammatical genders, and they don't necessarily follow the intrinsic gender. The word for a horse, for example, is a neuter noun, so you generally use the neuter pronoun es to refer to it. Of course, a horse also has a gender, so we tend to use the pronoun he or she in English instead of it. The real problem for English speakers comes up when we find an inanimate object that has a grammatical gender of masculine or feminine. Then we say it in English, but er or sie in German. This means that technically in German there are 3 its. The standard neuter one, es, that most English speakers just assume works for all inanimate objects, the masculine one, er, that English speakers only remember to use when it's a person or an animal that's masculine, and the feminine version, sie, which English speakers only remember if there is an intrinsic gender to guide them. So what is a better way to look at this all so that you understand it better? Ignore the word gender, and ignore the idea of masculine, feminine, and neuter. Think instead of the form English has the word the to refer to all nouns. German ones have der, die, and das to express the exact same thing. Remember which of these words accompanies the noun that you learn. The last letter of that noun must match the last letter of the pronoun that you use to replace the noun. Der, er, die, sie, das, es. The last letter is always the same. While the grammatical gender does generally line up with the intrinsic gender of people and animals, it is not a perfect guide, and it doesn't work at all for inanimate objects. Just remember that the pronoun must match the article, and not necessarily if the noun in question has an intrinsic gender or not. So, did you like the format of this video? Let me know in the comments down below. If you have other questions you would like me to answer in the next one of these, leave those in the comments down below too. Das ist alles für heute. Danke fürs Zuschauen. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss!